Hey, so I'm going to try and describe why the fix needed to happen and what it was. So let's go back here. Let's take a look at depot, and I'm going to, or depot orders. I'd probably just, what it is, what it is. So let's take a look at PO 14, and let's take a look at the value space saver. So this value space saver has the contact associated with it of Shante. So Shante is an individual, and remember, individual is a record type that sits between accounts and contacts. It's a interesting construct. So the idea is when you have individuals or organizations, or what Salesforce called persons accounts, is you crush that structure. So it's no longer accounts and contacts or buildings and people. Instead, what you have is simply just mushed together. You have persons, and persons are individuals, organizations, or I think household member. So let's cruise on down. And there's a new field that I added called volunteer or type, and I put it under volunteer. Now type is traditionally only on, or was only on, the organizations. And it's just a little pick list. It's not endemic to Salesforce. It's something that was actually that I inherited in 2010. I may, if I were to roll it today, I'd probably do something slightly different, but we have a lot of work in the database around it, so we're going to live with what we have. It's a pick list value. So let's cruise on over here to sharing settings, and we'll talk about why this matters. So this is our organizational-wide default settings. You can overwrite settings by, again, a vast array of different things that one can do. And it relates to who can see the data within an object or within a table based on the ownership of that particular item. So who owns the record of Shante? So we can go back here to Shante, and we can find the ownership. So let's see, owner created by system information, Richard. Let's just go ahead and do a control F for owner. Here, constituent owner is Richard. So that means the only people who can view this record by default are people who have that have the ability to see data that Richard has created, and that's defined through roles, through field permissions, through object permissions, as well as through the default sharing settings, and then overrides to the default sharing settings. And then also, clearly the page layout will impact the visibility as well. But then you could access those data points through reports. Then you can, munge reports, but that's probably TMI, too much information. The short story is the owner of a record impacts who can actually see that record and who can manage that record. That's part of why within Salesforce it's really important that when somebody leaves an organization, that another individual takes ownership of that data. I don't think at CFY we're following that so much, but that's it's not horrific. It's simply it's a challenge to clean up another day. So here we go. Richard owns this record. And remember, this is an individual constituent. So an individual constituent is that conflated or crushed construct where it sits between accounts and contacts. So the data is actually in both tables. In your 001, which is accounts, and your 003, which is contacts. And here we can see the 003. It's kind of nice. It makes it easy to, when you're pulling the data all out together, to see which table it belongs in. Those first three characters always denote the table, but I'm going aside, sorry. So here we go, sharing settings. We can see here account, contract, and assets by default are private. So that means if I create an account, only me and my team can see it. And my team is defined by roles, and those who are, above me on the role train. So an admin is at the top of the train. You could take a look. Our role structure within CFY is actually fairly flat. There's admin, and then just everyone right below it. with on the same hierarchical level. So it's fairly flat. If you were to, diagram it out, you'd have admin and then a bunch of chutes, and you'd have all the, the different people. If CFY were larger, and I think actually when it was larger, there was, we had grandchildren underneath the children. But here we go. So it's private. Accounts, contact, and assets. They say, oh, okay, so that means that this individual constituent and the child information from this individual constituent is limited by whoever can see Richard's stuff. So pretty much you're looking at just the Atlanta crew. Only the Atlanta crew and admins would be able to see this. Okay, that's that's all well and good. So we're going to say, well, goodness, so it does make sense that, we wouldn't necessarily want to, muddle Los Angeles's or San Francisco's, experience with the database through accessing information that isn't useful to them. So this is a good rule. It makes sense. But we'll say, oi, we have some instances where actually other people, other constituents of the database, or other users of the database, need to have access to Shanti's information, Shanti's record, and then also the child tables off of Shanti. So we're going to go on down here, and what we see these are all the, all the different. So we've made some stuff, public read-write, just so we don't have to deal with it. So, like the broad, and that these tables actually need to be deleted. City, region, sure, public read-only, that makes sense, we're good with it. And we'll keep cruising down. So these are just, the custom tables. But then we get into, kind of the fun stuff. Now we have account sharing rules. So you can create rules that say, you know what, yeah, that private, makes sense. But not always. So what are the instance? So here's one where if it's Jeans, or if it's, it looks like shared with Atlanta director group, I suspect that one is probably old and can be deleted. There's, a whole more here. Now, doing this based off of the unique ID, I guess that's one way. That's one way to do it. I kind of like that, but it's particular to just that one person. So there's rub with it. It's always that spectrum of accuracy versus flexibility, or detail versus flexibility. So this is an example of a very inflexible rule. But here we go. Here's the rule. Account equals individual or organization, and account equals fee for service. Then we share that information with the group help desk portal users too. And we can make sure, we can add people to that group of help desk portal users too. And groups are just a way of aggregating particular users. So we say, oh yeah, all right, you can read write. Opportunity, sorry baby, it's out of business. You can't access that one. And so notice it's account, contact, and asset. And case, yeah man, read right away, have fun. So what I did is I added in the individual and said if the individual equals, if it's a person and it equals an individual or an organization, and it's a fee for service, then make it read write. Opportunity, no baby, read write for the people who are members of this group. So let's take a look. And members of this group are defined by anyone who has a role within this hierarchy. Just made it really easy. So anyone that's within this hierarchy has this role, has that access. So instead of doing it by user, we did it by role, which I actually think is saner, but it could go either way, whichever way you wanted to do it. And then you could say, hey, I want to view those users, and here are the users. And well, that's interesting. I have no idea why some of these people are in this group. It looks like we had an admin that didn't know what they were doing, and that's okay. We're not going to stress it. We could, delete it. We could manage it. We could, say, really? It makes sense for Mark to be in that group, but does it really make sense for all those users? But many of them are no longer with CFY. It's just simply Drek. So back to our sharing settings. So what I did is I added an individual. It was just organizations and fee for service. So now let's go back to our friend Shante so we can talk about what the problem was. So the help desk logged into the portal and they said, I want to find this asset that is owned by our friend Shante. And we can't even see it on the related list. It looks like it doesn't exist there, which is cool. That if by design it wasn't supposed to be. But we can see that, we can go back to our PO and then we can see, oh, okay, so Shante, our friend, right there, she is the owner of DDL0006. So our help desk would log in. They'd type DLD000006, and it would say, it being the portal would say, I'm sorry, dear user, that asset doesn't exist. And we would say, oh, and they'd email us, hey, a user called and didn't have an asset. What's going on? And then we would say, oh, well, let me look into it. And we discovered that the reason they don't have access to it is because our friend Shante, her record never had the ability to share assets with the portal. By design, we were blocking out DevCom, as much of DevCom information as we could. So now we've changed a little bit and we want to share that information. So I updated the sharing rule so it'll include individuals, but they still need to be demarcated or denoted or updated, whatever word floats your boat, to being fee for service right here. That way we're limiting our exposure in the portal to just those records that have fee for service on it. We're not, showing them any of our high dollar donor information. We're limiting the scope as much as possible. So right now, if I logged into the portal, I would not be able to find the asset that Shante is the parent record for, that asset, until I change this to individual, to this type being fee for service. Then when I log into the portal, I would be able to find the asset associated. So kind of wraps, to bring it back to the tactical instead of the theoretical, the way to mitigate this challenge is twofold. The first one is, when we take a look at an asset, let's go back to our friend, cruising down to the depot order. Here we go. Depot order has a piece of toast. Isn't that kind of interesting? Or maybe it's a puzzle piece. And we're going to go right here. We're going to take a look at this asset. So to mitigate this challenge, there's two things that we could do. The first one is we can say, gosh, actually Shante doesn't own this asset logically, we've decided we sold the asset to Shante, and Shante can give that asset to anybody under the sun, and we actually don't care. It has nothing to do with our data set. And on that basis, we're just going to put a dummy record in that contact. And we're going to use Richard because, I don't know, why not? It could have been, you could even create a new contact record and call it, dummy, and just make sure it's that contact record is associated with a parent record that is an organization and has fee for service. So it doesn't matter so much who the contact is. I've suggested Richard, but it could be anything else. It could even be, I don't know, it doesn't matter. It just could be. And if we decide that we want to stay at the current construct that we're using, where we're denoting the PO as being Shante, and then also the asset being a Shante, then in that case, we're going to want to make sure that Shante's record has this type called fee for service. And we know that that needs to be true because of our sharing rule. The only way that we can share accounts, assets, or contracts with with users within the portal group is if the account type equals individual or organization, and the account type, remember accounts can be either individuals, organizations, or other household member. The type equals fee for service. And you'll find in the database there are several different types. I didn't build them out, but the type that we're using is down in the volunteer section, and we'll want to make sure that's fee for service. So either construct is cool, and I hope this was helpful to you and not too long.